All right. This is going to be a bit of a stream of consciousness kind of thing. I don't have a specific plan. I have a very good idea of what I want to do here, but specifically, I don't have an exact plan worked out, nor did I script any of this. So it's really just meant to be something perhaps useful for somebody who doesn't know how to use Excel, perhaps for somebody who does and maybe wants a different look on things or a different take. I'll let you know that when it comes to working with Excel, my approach is something I've never seen before. I've seen similar approaches, but not the same way that I do things because the way I do things is, to me, way more intuitive, even though it requires a bit more work. And one of the things that I found interesting about Excel when I started using it is that it sort of acts like an IDE, an integrated development environment, kind of like Visual Studio, um, maybe Visual Studio Code rather, but more like a lot of ways it's like working with a Visual Basic application in Visual Studio from Microsoft. Because while that particular IDE allows you to use Windows and create form fields and work with those, interact with them, and create applications that way using VB, Visual Basic, the Excel application uses Visual Basic for applications, as does Access. And that particular flavor of Visual Basic is specific to the application. So it either has features that only work with this application or removes features that you don't need because you're not actually using Excel to perhaps write an application that will monitor blood pressure or something at a hospital on an embedded system kind of thing. So you can still use this as an IDE in many ways, uh, but it requires, like I said, a little bit more work. And so, in some cases, if what I'm building today would be better done in a Visual Basic app, cool, that's probably true. The problem is, if you're like me and you're not, now I have a degree in software engineering, but when I learned how to do what I'm about to show you, I didn't have a degree. I didn't have access to any kind of integrated development environment on my work laptop. I did, however, have access to Excel. So I used Excel in similar ways to reach goals that I had for my own work. And it got to be well known, such to the point where in a company of 3,000 people, if somebody needed something done in Excel that was a little bit beyond your basic formula or drop down, I would get contacted by somebody because people knew who I was, and I wasn't it wasn't uncommon for me to get requests from people in departments I hadn't even heard of sometimes to help them with an Excel spreadsheet tool or a problem or something. Of course, a little bit of autonomy with my manager's approval. I was able to work those things in between jobs that I had, and I'd become so efficient at the actual job I was doing that I actually did have time to sort of consult with other departments on several occasions and create different tools for them. So it all started with just this basic need for a tool that would allow me to process comments. Okay, so I was in a call center. I'm sitting there working on just your basic call center stuff. Please start my service at, or stop my service, or removing. Other questions like I have a billing question. Why is my bill so high this month? So it'd be like that sort of thing. Or I'm not going to be able to make my payment this month, so I need to make some sort of payment arrangement. Setting up deposits were a big thing. There was also other things like energy audits. There were other things that would come up, outages. So lots of things that would come up on a regular call that would have to be documented. And the document template that we had was a Word document that had, you know, 10 or 12 scenarios on it. And they were all worded a certain way. So all you really needed to do was go into it, grab the comment that suited your call, and then edit it accordingly. But I was like, okay, I'm going to be doing this a lot. And it wasn't always real clear which note I needed immediately. So I created a tool that put all of the possible scenarios into Excel, and then allowed me through maybe a drop down or a press of a button was what I ended up deciding upon. I could bring that note into focus, and any information that I could gather that, like, say a name, what's your name, please, what's your address, that kind of thing, I could enter into a field in one place and it would automatically filter into all of the comments that I had available to me, so that if for some reason I thought it was a outage call, but it ended up being a transfer service call or a start service call, because sometimes you would get a call that would be like, yeah, calling because I don't power at my house, and that kind of sounds like they got shut off or there's some sort of outage going on. But sometimes what they were actually saying is the power isn't turned on in this house and I just moved in, so I need power. So you never knew exactly what the scenario might be. It might sound like one thing. In fact, a lot of times somebody calling in to check on their bill was actually a payment arrangement. So it wasn't very straightforward in every aspect. So you get into the call, then you go, okay, this is what the call is about. But there was another aspect to it that really made this comment template uh, come into focus. It really became the reason why I did it, and that was the word updated. We had a rule that said if a customer hadn't called in and talked to us for 30 days, then we had to update their records. So make sure their phone number was still good, they're at the right, their billing address is the same, name, any new, did they want anybody else authorized on their account, and that sort of thing. So we had to do all of that, make sure it was all up to date if it had been more than 30 days since they had contacted us. This happened a lot, but not often enough that sometimes you could just copy and paste the note and edit a couple things. Sometimes you had to write updated, and it got kind of cumbersome trying to put the cursor in the right spot to type in updated, and on it went until I was like, okay, I've had enough of that. So I basically went ahead and I'm going to show you real quick kind of what the whole concept was, and then I'm going to get into what I wanted to do today. But if a person was calling in, so you could go a customer calling in to start service at this address. Now, this address is something that needed to be changed because the record followed the customer and not the address. So, customer calling to start service address, setup service, deposit required. And we're going to say this is a new customer. So I wanted to have something like name and then updated. And so then the idea was if they had update, if they were updated. So if this equaled yes, updated, or updated, else nothing, right? And so and then so what would happen is, oh, and then you gotta go. So like I'll get back. It'll all come back to me. So I have a record here. This is my note. Let me do a little bit of cool formatting on it just to be sure. Okay, and then we're wrapping it. So this is my note. If they came in and we had to update, now I'll just put a little bit of a space right here. It's fine. So now my note automatically said updated. And, this was the whole goal to begin with. Yeah, you know what? I'll put it at the end. This makes more sense. Watch. Put that space right there. That way, if they weren't updated, that sits right at the front. But this was the whole point of it, was to just so that I didn't have to write, I didn't have to find the cursor, come in here, double click, or whatever I had to do. In the case of like having comment text in there, you'd have to double click into the cell, then right over there, updated. So I didn't want to hassle with that kind of thing. So I said, all right, I know that I can make things dependent upon other cells. So that's what I did. And then it just kind of became from there sort of this thing where And I pushed Alt Enter to get that second line because then it becomes a lot easier to read. Excuse me. So then I was like, okay, I don't want the customer right there, right? So I'm going to take that out of there. And I want my next line in there to read equals if, obviously a statement, and I'm going to put their name like right here just for fun. Equal is not empty. So I'm going to go, I can't remember. I'm going to have to look this up again. It's not empty. Then I want to put C3 in there. This is how, oh, that's right, except this is the formula version of it. The other one is how you do it in most programming languages. And then otherwise, just leave it blank. So that's my if statement there. What happened? Oh, that's probably it right there. Deposit, what was it saying? We found a typo in your formula. Oh, yeah. Wait. No. Oh, yeah. I think you have two equal signs, so you have to kind of go. Oh, maybe. See, stupid conscious, I get caught up a little bit sometimes. It doesn't say what the typo is. It must have fixed it. Okay, cool. So, oh, right. I took out the equal sign. That's what I did. Okay, so I want to put C3 in there, but I also want to add that space because obviously you want it to make sense when there's nothing in there. So ultimately, I'm going to call, okay, what's your name? Carl Johnson. Okay, Carl Johnson calling. Looks like you had service with us 20 days or 20 years ago, but we haven't talked to you since then, so I'm going to update you. So you can see my record updated accordingly. And the nice thing about that is if I had another, like let's say I take this and just copy this whole thing, paste it into another cell here, right? And this was stop service. All right, now I've got two notes that are equally updated like they're supposed to be, and they both say the same, they say the correct thing, but now my name is populated to both of them, right? So if I needed that note, then I have it. If I need that node, I had it. So I could then copy and paste that into the system. And so, of course, you've got another avenue to this where you want Alt S in that situation. And I'm going to go there and Alt Enter, and then I'm going to go equals, or no equals, if, and then of course I want to test and see if there's an address here is not empty. Remember, it's the two. Whoa, I can't type. It's the two. It's greater than, less than, next to each other. That's how you say is not. If it's not empty, go ahead and put the contents of C5, add a space at the end of it, and then otherwise just leave it blank. Hit that, do an ampersand. Oops, I need this. Then an ampersand. I'll do an Alt Enter, and then get rid of this address. Obviously, I want a period there. I'll leave it there just like that. Set up service deposit required. And then as time goes on, you see the usefulness of it. 604 main. And so, aha. See, now this is cool because I remember that you also go back in here and go, oh yeah, there's a space there too. And I don't, if it's going to look weird, I'm going to add spacing into the stuff that I'm entering in later so that my sentence never looks weird. That's the goal. What did I do? Oh, I guess I didn't need to put the ampersand there. Okay, so this is what you get. And this is the whole concept of it, was that I could now copy and paste the name, the address. I could decide whether or not that was updated, and it would update my records accordingly. There were some other things, whether or not you were speaking with an authorized user versus the actual account holder. Uh, and there's lots of things that come up that are pretty much the same on every call that you wanted to populate in. And the cool thing was that the next call you get does it need to be updated? It's already there. Okay, so this next call was John Smith, and he wanted to start service at 1212 or 121 221. How about that? B Baker Street. So you put that in there. That was the whole purpose behind me even making these tools and learning this stuff. So as time went on, I realized that I wanted to have separate sheets of things on there. So this would be my main sheet. This would be the one that I'd always work with. And this would be maybe all of the notes that were related to starts and stops. And then I would have another sheet that was related to payment arrangements. And all of the notes for a payment arrangement would be on this third sheet, and so on and so forth. And the purpose of that, of course, is organization. When you want to, okay, we're changing some of the rules on how we want to notate the start service stuff. So then you go into your start service sheet and change that as needed. And things change a lot in business, and so of course that was part of the deal. And I could have done this all on one sheet. That would have been fine too. But the whole idea was that if I could separate all of the data out of this sheet and have this just be for one specific note, and depending on what button I pressed on here when I made buttons, that note would populate based on whether or not it was a payment arrangement. So if they said, yeah, I want to make a payment arrangement, I could click that button, and even if there was information already here, the note would just populate whatever the payment arrangement was for this particular thing. So the buttons I press would require a macro that would alter the formula inside here and replace it with the one related to whatever the button was pressed. So it kind of ballooned into something that our management wanted us to do for the entire call center. And after a few months of being able to work on it, sometimes we'd get time off the phone or whatnot. Our primary goal being taking phone calls. We would get this time off the phone and we would work on it. And so that's how I learned how to do VBA. Therefore, that's what this video is about, is to kind of show you some of the things that you can do to learn VBA on your own, and to see some tricks on formatting, as well as the idea behind if you're going to do something more than once, it ain't a bad idea to make a tool out of it. Or as a woodworker, if you're going to do something more than once, make a jig. I just heard that recently. Makes a lot of sense to me. So that's what I'm going to do. All right. So I'm going to clear all this out of here. First thing I want to do is to show you, let's collapse this, what VBA is all about, right? So up here, there's this tab called Developer. If you don't have it, you'll have to go into File, Options, and then you'd have to come down into Customize the ribbon, and then oftentimes that's unchecked, this developer thing, so just check it. That'll give you that tab. If you don't have it, it will look like this, and you see that you don't see the developer there anymore. So it's File, Options, under Customize ribbon, and then over here click the developer box, and then you'll have that. You're going to need it because that's where you have your design mode. Design mode, it lets you, it sort of pauses formulas, so that if you're working in design mode and you have a formula that does something, it won't work. You'll be able to work with it and edit it and then come back out of design mode to see it work. So it's kind of like a pause button, sort of. But anyway, recording a macro. This is the first thing I did, is I learned how to record a macro. So I hit record macro. I'm going to call this example macro, right? Like this. and I'm going to hit OK. And in this one, all I want to do really is just, maybe I want to create an if statement. And I'll start with A2 equals yes. I don't know. Let's do this thing for the updated, right? And then, so there's my formula. I put that in there. I hit that. And then I hit stop recording. Now, what I've essentially done is Excel has recorded everything I just did. And it will put that into something called a module. Okay, so you're going to go into this Visual Basic. This macro button here will show you all of the macros that you have created right here. It will allow you to run the macro. Okay, and the one thing about a macro that you'll notice is that nothing happens when you enter yes into there. If I go back in there and run that macro, oh, look, the macro put the formula in there for me. And then in design mode, it's not supposed to work. It's working. It makes me a liar. Nice. Anyway, so I've taken that out of there, right? And this is the example of what I was saying with the macro hasn't run, so that's not in there yet. But I changed that to say yes. So then you would come to your thing and you'd run a macro. And now the formula's in there. And so I did that for a while. And then I realized, hey, what's happening behind the scenes? So I found this button. And just to show you once again, by clicking Alt F11 or clicking this Visual Basic button, you're going to bring up this is a separate window that comes up. And this is the Visual Basic environment. And it's like the module. And what you'll notice is that for every sheet that you have open or have created, there will be something here in this Microsoft Excel object along with the workbook, which refers to this entire thing, this entire application. To illustrate how that works, this is going to be sheet. Let's go like this, starts, just for the sake of the first time the first thing we discussed. So then I'm going to Visual Basic, and now you'll see this sheet is now changed to start stop. So any code that you type in here is going to refer to that sheet alone. It will not affect this sheet or this sheet. So this Object Explorer over here, it's actually a Project Explorer section over here, which can be viewed. If you go to View, this Project Explorer is what this section is. This tells you what sheet you're working in. If you're working in this sheet and you just want macros that are specific to that one sheet, then you'll put it all in here. If you want it to work on any sheet, you can put it in here. But the modules part, this is where macros that you record will go. But I will also mention that if you would like to, you can record, you can create macros in here too. And then they'll be available to the entire workbook using that window of run the macro. Now, if I hit this, you'll notice that there's two macros in there, right? And if I were to say, maybe I wanted that to say updated when F4 was selected, then I could copy all of that code down into this macro. And now, interestingly enough, it's just going to be the same macro. It's got the same cell selected. This reference is a relative reference, meaning that from the row that this particular formula is in, I want to go up 2 rows and to the left 5. So up is a negative value, down is a positive value. So if this were R2, then it would actually put this particular formula 2 rows down from here if I change that to, or excuse me, it would look for this and actually look for this and A4, not eighth. Well, it would be A. I'm in F4, so it would look for this in A6 because it's going to be looking for it in 5 columns to the left and 2 columns down. But in this case, it's going to look for a value in 2 columns up, excuse me, 2 rows up 5 columns to the left. So if you see this, this isn't often used, but this is a reference that shows you that it's going to be referencing a cell that's from the current cell that we're putting this formula in. This is how many rows and columns it is. That's what we're looking for. And then we're looking for the value of yes. And because this has double quotes, you're going to have to double quote it. And you put updated in there, otherwise put nothing in there. Because what this is actually doing is it's putting this entire formula in there. But the quotes in here means that it's actually putting yes in quotes into the formula. If you didn't have double quotes, it would only put the value of yes in there, which would look like, where is that formula anyway? F4, right? So it would say, it would look like this if you didn't put those in there anyway. If A2 equaled yes, then it would say yes. It would do that instead of yes, because you want it to be yes in quotes. Otherwise, it'll just throw an error, because without the quotes in there, it's not going to try to put a string value or an actual text. It's going to try to put something called yes, a variable. So without the quotes, it's looking for some sort of variable called yes, which could be, it could refer to a cell with a named range that I could get to later, probably will. But anyway, the purpose of these double quotes is to make sure that when it puts the formula in there, yes appears inside quotes. Same here with updated, and same here with the null value. The null value is just empty quotes, which essentially is those two quotes right there. Okay, so I looked at this code after I did it, and this is just one example, but I looked into this and saw all this stuff that just happened, and I noticed, okay, it did this. Why? That's because when I recorded the macro, after I told it to put this formula in there, I hit enter, and it moved the thing down one, right? But let's see what happens. And I'm gonna make F5 where this goes, and I'm gonna take this down one row, so it's gonna be A3 this time, and I'm gonna make. I don't want to save it. I just hit stop. You don't have to save this. Once you hit stop, it'll allow you to go run it. So now that that's the case, I'm going to come back up here and I'm going to type yes here, and then I'm going to run that macro, example 2, and now I have a formula in this as well, but it's looking for the value in A4. Ah, right, because I'm in A5. Okay, so I needed to go to, okay, so this actually would have worked just fine if I left it there. It would have been perfect, because again, it's a relative reference. That's where I went wrong, my bad. So now when I run, and it doesn't even matter, I can come over here, go macro 2, because it's a specific reference to that cell where the formula is going to be put in, then it's going to put in that cell no matter where I'm at. You could also change that to just go like this, and then it'll actually look for, this is the interesting thing, it's selecting F4 first and then referencing that cell as its reference for where to look. So if I'm in the active cell and I happen to be here, right, then this is going to look up 2 rows and 5. So it's actually going to look into that cell for this value of yes. But it will put it wherever. So let's try it. I'm going to hit run macro 2. So now I have a formula in here. It wants to see what's in B5. So if I go here, and so that's the difference between the reference here. This is a relative, and this is a specific one. And what we're looking at here in this code is a very simple thing. It's a step-by-step recording of what you did. So in this macro, I put my cursor in F4. I threw this formula in there, and then I hit enter. That's what this says. So when I started doing this, I looked at that, and I started learning what these things meant. And I realized, okay, range in quotes F4 equals select. That means if I want to do that, let's go A8, right? Let's not put anything in there. Let's just select it. Oops, I hit save. Don't do that. Hit stop. Now, if I run macro 2, you're going to watch the cursor go over to A. Oh, I did it. Sorry, guys. You think I had... so we're going to hit select. Select is basically a function associated to the range. The range is a function. Select is one of the methods available to it. Okay, stop. So that turns white instead of yellow. Okay, now if we run example 2, it's just going to select cell A. So your macro is basically telling Excel what you would physically do, but you're doing it in code. So if I were to select cell 8, this is how I tell Excel to do that for me. All right, so that's a brief example of how I worked with VBA and this VBA editor to learn VBA, which then cascaded into other things, and probably why I inevitably, once I got the time to go to school, I went into software engineering and got my degree because I really enjoyed it. And I had a great time learning Excel VBA, and it really showed me what could be done in terms of just a basic application like this one. So, with all that in mind, those are the basics. And in fact, if you wanted to, you could do most of this manually. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how I format all of my Excel tools. This is how I format them. And I'll tell you why before I do it. Okay, so if I'm trying to do, let's say I want to do a question here, right? All right, what's your favorite color? Oh, get out of here. What's your favorite movie? You know what's happening is that I've got remove this module, and you don't have to. All right, and then I'm gonna hit stop here. Okay, and then maybe I want favorite ice cream. So I have that, and then I have this next to it. I can enter values. Doi, right? So the fifth element. Sorry, you don't probably hear doi that often. Peanut butter cup, because I'm goofy. Okay, right? And you might want to accomplish that as well in other ways, like form controls or ActiveX controls. So let's see, this is a button, combo box, checkbox, spin button, list box, text box, radio buttons. What's this? If they're grayed out like that, they're really not available as far as I know. Let's go with list box, right? You could accomplish the same thing over here with a list box where you put the values in there. Come on, what are you doing? Got to go into design mode, that's right. All right, so you can assign macro, and now you can tell when the list box changes what can be done with it, right? So you can tell this thing to add, like if I put a value in here, you can tell the macro to add this to this list box. Okay. There's other things that you can do with these types of form controls. Like I want to add radio buttons, right? So you want to add a radio option. Excuse me while I format this. And then you want to add another radio button. You see these kind of work like this because they're kind of in the same group, right? So if you want to add like favorite color, you can come in here and you can edit the text. And I want this to be red, and I want this one to be orange, so on and so forth. set these side by side. And I can make that favorite color question a radio box, radio buttons. And then you can assign macros to these. You don't have to, but obviously maybe design mode. All right, so maybe you want to do a little conditional formatting. So we come back here to the record a macro. I hit the wrong one. I want to record a macro, and then I want to go red color. I'm just gonna call it that. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna just color this red, just solid red. Okay, and then I'm gonna go back to developer and I'm gonna stop that macro, right? So now I want to go back in. I'm going to my modules because that's where they get recorded. And so this is red color, right? With selection interior, blah, blah, blah. So I can actually run in here and I can say, I've got this one. It's called red color, okay? I can go back over here to this thing and I can go into my design mode and I can assign a macro, and that macro can be red color. And I click OK. I can go over here to the orange thing, and I can assign that a new macro, but I want to create a macro, so I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to record a macro, and I'm going to go orange color, right? Just like the other one, make it kind of consistent. Hit OK. I'm going to turn that particular thing into an orange color like that. Very subtle. Maybe I should use blue. I could change that color actually. Let's go to there. That's better. That'll be a little bit more clear. Back to developer. Stop recording. Go into my list of macros. I can always edit that macro. Obviously, I don't want that first one. All right. So now I have an orange color, and then the purpose of that is so that I can assign an orange color here. All right. Oops, I didn't want to edit it. I wanted to assign it. Okay, or I want to assign that macro, orange color, click OK, and then the whole idea behind that is that when you click this, well, I'll tell you what, let me edit the macro, edit macro orange color, and that was for F4, so that was good. I'm going to do the same for this red color one, because it was using a red. This was, remember I took out the range on the other one, it made it a reference, a relative reference. Okay, so we'll come over here and we will go over here to clear, and we'll go all. We can do that here too. Clear all, just as a starting point. So now the purpose of that is that when you click these buttons, you'll get the different color in there. But see, the thing is that with these controls, for some weird reason, and I've never understood why, because I get frustrated enough sometimes I don't want to check into it. But I've had issues where these things, in some cases, I would click on this, and it would grow in size for some weird reason, so it would get bigger. Never could understand. The rest of the sheet would stay the same, but each time you click this, it would get bigger to the point where it took up the entire screen, and I've seen that happen on several occasions. So instead of trying to like understand that and deal with form controls, because I didn't expect that behavior, and because I expected that there's probably more behavior like it, I didn't want to mess with it, right? So I know that if I can format cells a certain way, that I can make sure that everything on my page is under my control. Not only that, I don't have to worry about getting rid of those things. And you should see some of the code, and in some cases when we were working on that commenting template, I had a person I was working with, and she's very good. I'm not going to complain about her, but she had to stack all of those different check boxes on top of one another, check boxes, drop downs, all this stuff that were created from these controls that you see here. She had to stack them on top of each other and then make them visible and invisible with macros every time you did a formula change or something happened. The corresponding checkbox would become visible and all the other form controls would be invisible. And that's fine. I mean, it's great work, but it only worked when you stacked them on top of one another. So if you had to edit the one on the bottom, you had to move, it could be up to 10 sometimes. And then once you're done editing, you had to go put them all back in place. And so at some point, I decided I do not want to make my life that complicated because if I do a little bit of work up front, I don't have to. So now we're going to get into the meat of what I really wanted to do on this video, and that is, it's already going to become too long, so I apologize for that. I'm going to try to put timestamps on there at some point so that you can skip ahead and don't have to listen to me ramble. But I started thinking, all right, here's the thing. I got a name, I got phone numbers that I needs to get, I have addresses, city, state, zip, uh, there's that updated thing. There was we had, I can't remember what we called it, but I think it had something to do. It had something to do with whether or not we're talking about authorized party versus a user. So authorized, and then there was some. I think it had something to do with maybe just comments or whatever. So we started off with this concept of I have all these labels. Where am I going to put that data? And so what we kind of did was we started thinking, let's put, this is going to be kind of tedious, but let's put the actual value that we're after under the label, like in some forms, which works just fine. I should have done a macro for this. Maybe I could speed it up. I'm not that good with OBS. But anyway, so here is where I don't need those to be. Okay, and then I'm gonna like create like a thing here, just like there we go. Okay, so name would go here, phone number. So, inevitably we would take these labels and we would format them such that they would have borders and that they would also have a color that was easy to see text through, something like a light blue, and then each of the inputs would also have that. One of the things that, I mean, it's fine, right? So your name is Phil, good, and your phone number and all that. But one thing that I wanted to do was sort of take up less space where possible. Excuse me. So I thought, well, the phone numbers really aren't they're not that long, but addresses are, right? So what if, hold on a second. Okay. What if instead of having this sort of setup, I could have a setup where my information maybe wasn't so, hmm, I don't even know what the word is. Monopolized? Maybe this one cell wouldn't be monopolized for it because an address could be quite long. And so why not have all of the fields that long? But now I've got lots of real estate on this particular page I can't use. But I could do things side by side, right? So what if I did side by side stuff? Clear these formats. Clear all. So I've got name, right? And phone. Now I've got two fields that I can use that are going to be different lengths, I would assume. Yeah. So my phone number is going to be a little bit shorter than my name. The address could be probably as long as the name, but then you got your city, Usually a fair enough, a long enough thing. What about your zip, right? Zip, your state, 2 characters. So you could put your zip side by side with that. You're going to run up, even if you use the 10-digit, well, 9-digit zip code with the dash in it, you're still only looking at 12 characters altogether. So if your address is 20, your column is going to be as wide as your address, and you might not need all that. So I began conceptualizing, how can I make it that I can use up space the way I want to use it? Because Excel has a clear setup of, this column is this wide, period. There's no, this column is this wide, so part of the cell can take up this much space and part of it can take up another. You don't get anything like that in Excel unless you do what I do. So what I'll do is I'll start by selecting an entire column, Control Shift, right arrow, and then right click on the heading while everything is highlighted. And this will highlight every single column. Change the column width to 2. And now you see something that's very similar to graph paper. Okay, so why would I do that? Because I will make use of this merge and center feature to create my name label, right? Merge and center, you can still change the actual width. And then merge and center with left. So now I've got a name box, right? So a name label and this right here. Okay. Okay, next stop, I want to add the phone numbers. So let's just go, phone numbers, how long? So now merge and center, and I can say phone, and then grab this, merge, center, left it, take this and make it, can you do phone number? You do custom. So custom, where is it? More number formats. Custom. Well, maybe special, yeah. Yep. Phone number. Bam. Just like that. Okay. And then here's their address. And I'm going to go ahead and format this out again. Of course, I'm still making it as wide as the thing above it, but that's okay. It's fine if you want to do that. And it looks fine. But now I can go over here and I can go hit this and then go state. I got 2 cells, that's all I need. And then the state is 2 characters. And I'll get into how to, there's a lot we can do with that as well. And then there is, I just said characters, I meant cells. And then there's the zip. And so if we look at this, I'm using 3 for that and 2 for the state. Oh, I didn't want the white color, just a border and a border and borders like this. Borders. All right. So cool. Now I've got inputs wherein I know this is the name, Shane. This is the number. Formats for you. He lives at 121 Main, and state is New Mexico. Zip code. Now, what I have is that tiny section has 5 pieces of data in it, and I don't have to move stuff around, and it fits where I need it to fit. It looks like a natural form, and if I really want to get crazy, and I usually do, then I like to go ahead and actually color all the cells on the outside of my form and all the way through the center and down and down and through here and etc. And then we can go gray there and then just kind of, normally I would start with doing all this, but I wanted to get to the meat and potatoes of the other thing. But anyway, now we have a gray border. Now, if you think about what Windows looks like, this is more like what a Windows application might look like. You've got your white fields are editable, and you can lock these down so that they can't edit these as well, and these will stay in place. And you can make it so they don't even select it, because when you can select those and try to edit it, you get an error when you do that. But on and on it goes, and so then I've got my updated, and here's where this particular formatting thing really comes in handy. and I'm going to get into this for you at some point in one of these videos. It's not going to be this one. I need to separate these out a bit so they're not extremely long. But yeah, you'll notice what I'm doing here is I'm making what appears to be like a checkbox. And that's exactly what it's going to be. But it's going to be a lot different than what you'd expect. I'm not going to use form controls, which I could, because that's what they're for. But I'm not going to do that, because they annoy me. That's really why. That's really the bulk of it. Whoops. That should go right over here. I did that wrong. Okay. Cool. And if I want to continue with like continuity as well, I can. And always move stuff over. Okay. Cool. So, and if I really want to be like pedantic, I could. Matter of fact, you can go like this, merge that, gotta hit that twice, and that way it runs right up against it so that you know those are in fact associated. That's what you want. Okay. Make sure all my borders are in place. Cool. These are the things that I wanted to accomplish. And check this out, because comments are kind of one of those things where you might end up having a lot to say. This would be for my commenting template. This is something that would be more paragraphical, and therefore I would want something a little bigger. And now that I've got all that, I've got this tiny block of form fields essentially that that look nice. I can then edit them, and then in the cases of adding comments to something, like customer called in, I cannot type, customer call to start service, and then this would end up using that formula thing I showed you earlier. Could end up in the actual interaction, which you could then put over here and make it as big as you want. So really what I wanted to boil down to is using macros and formulas along with formatting, which is what we're doing here. And you can also change, this is one of those things where you probably don't want to mess with it too much, simply because if you're in a place that doesn't appreciate beautiful formatting, you don't want to use things like this. But you can change the entire look of this thing if you want to. You're not stuck with just doing the typical stuff, but I would recommend readability at least, for sure. But this right here is basically how we would build a commenting template. And then obviously we're in the wrong. I can rename this if I want to, like main, and then move that over like that. So this might be where I keep all of my pre-created notes and the formulas that are associated with them, and they would draw those formulas, like the name and all that would draw from these cells and put them into a section over here. And then of course whenever it gets put in here, which would be this right here, would usually be, in this case for what we're talking about today, this might be customer noticed some scarring on the face of the meter. This is the kind of stuff that would be one-offs. Oh, this was for a power company, by the way, so that's why I say meter. But this would be for the kind of the one-off stuff that you don't anticipate or that doesn't happen on every call. And so this would end up populating somewhere in the note that would make sense. And of course, that would be up to you how that works. But generally speaking, in the note that you're trying to make, you would then sort of add this, like, whatever I will use named ranges, and I might come up with a good tutorial for named ranges next. And I'm actually going to use named ranges, so I'll do that next in another video. But this right here is essentially where I start. Sorry about that. I paused the video if you didn't notice, because I'm having a difficulty with coughing. I'm not even sick, it's just happening that way. Okay, so anyway, this is how I begin a project. Is once I determine the kind of information that I want, that I'm going to collect from a person, input, for example, then I will format my fields. This actually isn't something that's immediately straightforward. I don't just go boom, there's my fields. But I start with what I think I need, and then I edit it as needed. And as I showed you before, if you highlight a cell, I didn't tell you what I was doing, but I showed you this once. If you highlight the cell, move the cursor around until you get this little arrow thing, then you can move that around and it will pull the formatting with it, including the merge and center and all the alignments. So when you find out, okay, I don't want that sitting right there. Maybe I want that above where it says updated. Then you can take that whole section, pull it over, take this section, and pull it down because you don't know exactly where it's going to go. And then put this thing you think, oh, that works better there. I'll put it there. And then because this one is so prominent, I want to make sure I don't miss it. I'll put it right. Yeah, I'll put it right here. My advice would be to never change the actual height or width of a cell, and would always be to make sure that if for some reason you need more than for that row, I would just combine two rows. Now, this is a pretty good baseline. Another thing you could potentially do, and I've done this in the past as well along with this, is I would take my row height and take that down to some small amount, because at that point you get a lot of control over, okay, I need that much of the seller, I need that, or whatever, if I just need two of these. In fact, let's take these row height, I think 15 is close to the default. Let's say you want to, I got 1, 2, 3, 4, so I got 6 cells selected here, and I want to be able to use 3 of those as one, so I might divide that and put this by 5, and then I can highlight 3 of these guys. Whoops, not like that. Holding the shift key, I can do that, and then just grab 3 of these guys, merge and center them, and then maybe I want only 2 of these guys below that. I put a border around it so you can see. So now what I've done is I can create a bit of separation between those two, but I would not affect, like if I wanted this section here of something like this, I could then create something similar to that. I don't know why I would have something like that over there, but maybe I want it just to be a decoration of some kind. Like, pay attention to this. So I can then have this nice big value of something. Like a total is a good idea to have a big value in. Change that to white, make it like a bold color, and bold that out, make it nice and dark. And so when you type it, like if that for some reason was a total on a sheet, you could then do its thing. You could put it where you want it inside that value. You can make it bold, you can make it bigger. And then maybe this is like total customer price. It's not set in stone, is what I'm saying. And then you can use these little tricks like this that if you divide these into a certain number, like I said, I had 6 of those selected. If I want to make them, if I know they're 15 is the height value, and I want to have 3 of them equal 1 height, then what I would do, of course, is take all of the cells and make them the height of 1/3 of the row where it started, and that would give me the opportunity to use 3 cells, 3 rows in a row to merge together into one cell. This is not without its issues, of course. There are some things that you don't get out of it, um, but for the most part, this is the best way to do it, I found, because then you have total control over the size and area that you need for inputs, and you're not stuck with the cell size it is. So if you have a value of 1 and you have a column that's this wide, it's silly to have that. Plus, if you want it to the right like that, then it's going to look weird if your caption is over here, right? Your quantity, and way over there is the quantity. So this allows you lots of control over where exactly. I don't want that to be 20 spaces away. This is fine. And so you just start working with the size of your columns that way, merging them together. If you run into a column that you don't really have to worry about other values in other rows, then you can change the size of it. But you can go willy-nilly on that one. As long as you're formatting it this way, though, you won't have your spreadsheet. Some spreadsheets look really, really, really bad and cluttered because of the fact that your cells are set like that. So if you do this, you can actually put a lot of organization into your spreadsheets and make them look super clean and tight. But also, if you're starting to notice, I don't know if you have, but if you're starting to notice, you can begin to see some things with a little bit of. Let's take line. Let's do draw borders, okay? I'm gonna take kind of a darker gray, and I'm gonna draw. That's not what I wanted. I want to draw the border, okay? And then the border color. Where do I set that? I can't remember off the top of my head right here. Line color. Let's take a darker gray. Let's take a much darker gray, and let's just I don't know. Let's hit there and right here, and then let's take like a white color, I guess. Draw my border again. I did that wrong. I want my line color to be like white, and then I'm going to color it up here. I'm making it lighter than the gray background. Hit escape, go back to normal. Now, I don't know about you, and I'm not an artist, okay? So you might have a different take on this, but if I am looking at this guy, kind of looks like a button, doesn't it? Matter of fact, just to drive that point home, one of the things that you can add from the console is a button. Button have its own macro assigned to it. Very much looks like a button over here to me, with a bit of styling, but that's what it does. That's what it looks like. Um, I'm not going to get crazy on this, but you can, in fact, make that, if you press on it, you can change the border such that it will look like you're pressing a button. I won't do that, but if I were to say, put something like that in there, then I have this really cool thing that I will come to later. It's also gonna be similar to what I do with these checkboxes, but I can make this cell look like a button and act like one, and that is huge because when you start thinking about that, you start thinking, really, so I don't have to use a single one of these form controls that has its own macros assigned to it, which by itself isn't bad, but they will act weird, and I can create stuff in here. I don't have to learn something out up here. I just have to learn how to format. Do a lot of formatting, and I can make this act like a button. And then with that in mind, when I come back to the next one, we're going to talk about name ranges for drop downs, and those name ranges will also come in handy when it comes to these button clicks and these. I do have a video on this already about how to make these work as checkboxes. I also have that video also shows you how these can become much like radio buttons, to where if you had two, let's say you had apples. Let's go back to that color example, I guess. So favorite color, and then we go red, right? And then I'll go, uh-oh, I made that one weird. Okay, red, and there's my merge and center. Draw a border around it, just your standard border, outside border. I want that to be white. And then over here we have orange orange, and then, oh, wow, is that how it's come to this orange? Okay, and then box. So I've got favorite color. Let me put a colon in there so I feel better about myself later. Favorite color, colon, and here are my choices, right? And so when you click into this one, oh, my border color is should be black. Okay. And I don't want to draw it. I just want to go ahead and put it in there. Okay. So now I've got red and I've got orange. Here's one of these examples where in this column I don't want a lot of space between those two, so I can kind of use my formatting because I thought ahead, and I can put those closer to each other. Okay, cool. Which is how you can now begin to see how clutter is less obvious when you have formatting set up. Anyway, all right, so I want to put this kind of like that. See, I can get pretty into the weeds when it comes to formatting. But in this case, check this out. I got Wingdings 2 font. Most people have it. So come down here, the letter capital P makes a checkbox. Look at that. And then, oh, see, capital P, change it to Wingdings 2, Wingdings 2. You'll get a checkbox. Come back in here, go ahead and make sure these are centered. It looks even better that way. It might even look better if it was at the bottom, but there we go. So we're centered and centered. So the same thing applies right here. Wingdings 2. So with the same formatting, we can turn this into a checkbox. And that too. I guess I didn't do that right, did I? It's because I don't spell correctly. Wingdings 2. Okay, cool. So the essence of it is, with this formatting and a little bit of macros, we can make this checkbox appear when you hit red, and then, or when you hit that checkbox, and then when you click orange, we can make that one check and that one uncheck so that you can't check two, or we can make it so you can check them this way. So I think I'm going to cover that next, and then after that, I will take this over to um, where we start making comments out of it. So we'll do the named ranges along with drop downs and how those work with checkboxes and buttons, and then we will talk about making comments on accounts that are pretty standard. Again, these are not necessarily useful to everybody, these tools that I'm creating. The whole purpose behind it is to kind of show the skill involved in the things that can be done in Excel that a lot of people don't do, and a lot of people just use things kind of out of the box, which again we could circle back to. If it requires this much work, you could just hire a developer. But if you're somebody on the phones in a call center and you're sitting there thinking, boy, we could really use this thing. I see a lot of problems with X and I want to solve that problem. And I saw that video from that dork on YouTube that said, hey, do this. Let me go check that out. And then you go check it out, or you remembered everything and you followed along. And you're sitting there in your seat in between calls, which is what I did. You made this thing that was uber useful for yourself. And you said to your manager, hey, look, I was messing around with this template that you guys have us using, and this particular thing makes it so easy to just create a note. And I'm not trying to brag, but this thing that I'm working on right now, just as an example, is so good that it actually allowed me. I don't know other reps and how they wanted to do it, but I didn't want to have after call. I wanted to be like really good on my stats. Because of this tool, I was able to make sure that my comments were done and I could paste them into an account before hanging up with a customer and be able to then go right to the next call. So these things aren't trivial, but it may not apply to you, but you could find something useful in what I'm showing you that you could apply to the job that you do, and then become the guy that people know they go to for Excel stuff, and probably even process problem solving anyway. I have a variety of different things that I've done that are similar to this, that start with this particular concept of formatting your spreadsheet so that it has visual appeal, which really is a very, very important thing. It doesn't seem like it would be. It almost seems for some people to be trivial or even uh, feckless, like have no, they could be vapid, has no purpose. But I'm telling you, the extra time that you spend formatting something like this, people enjoy using it more because it's visually more appealing when you can look at your data in clusters that aren't sort of following or subject to the rules of the situation that they're in, but that seem to flow into a very easily readable format that fits it. It's almost like Kismet when you do this correctly, so that you don't have a bunch of blocks of data that doesn't exactly line up to each other. So anyway, this will be video one in the series. I don't know what I'm going to call it yet. If you've made it this far, you might need a hobby. But I mean, if you have and don't hate the sound of my voice, even though I have a coughing fit once in a while, go ahead and subscribe and like it and make a comment. Ask questions. I'll keep my eye on that. If you have sort of a problem that you want to solve and you want to know how I would do it, you can ask how I might do it. And yes, you can use that in your own uh, office environment. You can even take credit for it like it was your idea. I'm okay with it. So anyway, there you go. And hopefully you enjoyed this.